Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics we will be looking at the secondary objectives and the match for Death Card. So which secondary objectives are a best fit for our army and what to consider before we select secondaries. So let's get started. So today the 13th of March and some good news. In a week's time, next Sunday, I will be playing my first game of the year. Looking really forward to come out of the house and to hit the tabletops and also enjoy a first game in real life with the new codex. So I will be facing a 2,000 points Ultramarines at a local Danish battle report channel. So hopefully I can bring some glory to Nurgle, and I will try to have a link for you when we play it, so you could, if you want, you could see the battle happening. So I think this is a good chance for me to try out some of the new units and tactics, and also to start considering the secondaries that are good for Death Guard. So in this video, I will review the secondaries and with a special focus on Death Guard. So first, a brief overview on primaries and secondary objectives, the basics there, the review of the various categories, including the updates from the Grand Tournament 2020 FAQ. If you play with the Grand Tournament rules, some of the secondaries are different from the base book, and also with the FAQ, some things have been updated. And then also looking at the 3 Death Guard specific secondaries in those categories. So let's take a look. So the mission objectives, the basics. So in 9th edition, we have a significant change from 8th edition to how victory points are achieved. First of all, we have primary objectives that are mission based, but typically for all missions starting from turn 2, in your own command phase, you score points, the primary victory points, depending on how many objectives you control. So normally, if you control 1 objective, you get 5 points. If you control 2, or in some maps 3, you get 5 points more. And if you control more objectives than the opponent, you get 5 points more. And the maximum points you can get in the whole game is 45 points from primary objectives. And this is probably, I mean, if you can take more than your opponent and keep them, you typically would win a game. And yeah, primaries of course is really important. But on top of the primaries, we have to select 3 secondary objectives from 5 different categories, and then there is a mission specific secondary. And each of the secondaries can maximum score 15 points. So the 3 secondaries can give us a total of 45 points more. So basically, we can see here that the impact of the secondaries is as crucial as the impact from the primaries. We have also now, with a new codex, one of these objectives, not more than one, basically, or yeah, up to one of these objectives could be a Death Card specific objective from our codex. And the secondaries, of course, are very influential to the end score of the game. It's important to choose good secondaries to maximize the chances of a good score. And if you choose some bad secondaries from the beginning, you can be at a disadvantage even before the game starts. And even if you play well here, you could be losing the game from poor secondary selections. So in this video, I will focus on all the secondary objectives, but I will not focus on the mission-specific secondaries in these videos. So let's look at the categories and which secondary objectives to consider as Death Guard. So starting with the first category, Purge the enemy. Here we have 4 different secondaries to choose from. First of all, we have the Assassinate, which gives us 3 victory points for each enemy character model that we destroy at the end of the battle. So this is overall could be a potentially good objective, provided that the enemy has several characters with a potential to get the maximum 15 points. Of course, if the opponent only has, let's say, 2 characters, then it would be not so good choice. You could maximum score 6 victory points. In my opinion, the Assassinate is probably okay for Death Guard, and because we have quite high resilience and survivability, we are maybe able to grind down the opponent and get to his characters by the end of the game. Probably in melee, we can kill some of these characters, but of course it depends what the characters are and how many before we think to select this type of secondary. Then if we look to the bring it down secondary, this changed with the FAQ, and this gives victory points for destroying enemy vehicles and monsters. So again, it depends a bit how many points you could score, is what types of vehicles, how many does your opponent have, and monsters, etc. If they don't have vehicles, then of course this cannot give you points. But now the new scoring for this is that if the vehicle or monster has between 1 and 10 wounds, it gives you 1 victory points. Before it was basically 2 victory points, so this is a nerf now. And then between 11 and 19 wounds, you get 2 victory points. And if the vehicle has more than 20 wounds, there are not so many of those in the game, you would score 3 victory points. I think this is again overall quite good, and be able to, yeah, we have the playboard scrollers maybe with heavy weapons. We have the Mephitic Blightholders multi-meltas being able to take vehicles, especially if they are a bit more maybe only toughness 7 opponent vehicles or something like this. We have also hard-hitting characters that can cleave open vehicles and monsters from the opponent. Hard-hitting marines and terminators, they can do a lot of damage on the vehicles of the opponent vehicles. But again, you have to see what does your opponent have, and is there do you have a chance to score a good score with this. Then Titan Hunter, you get victory points for destroying Titanic models. For 1 destroyed, you get 10 victory points, for 2, 12, and for 3, 15. So this is very situational. I mean, does your opponent have Titanic models, and do you think you can take them down? Then if they have, it could be good. I mean, just killing 1, you get 10 victory points. And then Cut Off the Head gives victory points for destroying the enemy warlord, and the victory points you get are depending on how quickly you do it. So in the first battle round, you would be able to get 13 points, in the second 10, in the third 6, etc. And if you kill the enemy warlord in the last part of the game, basically you score so little points. I think this makes really no good sense. So I think it's very difficult to kill the enemy warlord quickly to score good points on this. Only if the opponent is playing really badly and maybe exposes the warlord and very uncareful. But I don't think you could go for that. And Death Card, we are not good at sniping characters and etc. early in the game at least. Now going to the No Mercy, No Respite category. Here we have thinned their ranks. Here we keep a track of all enemy models destroyed, and for every 10, rounding down, we gain 1 victory point. So a model with 10 or more wounds gives 1 victory point. So this is a very low score per killed model. And maybe if you have facing some guys that really have a lot of horde units, but even then it's very difficult to score a high number of points. I mean, for example, 60 warriors or something, 60 cultists, even you would be getting 6 victory points at the end of the game if you would kill all of those. And if you are facing elite armies like Custodes or models with a couple of wounds, terminators, etc. I mean, you are spending a lot of firepower to take something out that will score you, for example, here 5 intercessors, 5 aggressors, or terminators. Something you would be getting, you would be getting 1 victory point here for killing high elite opponents. So I think this is not so interesting. And then in the grind them down secondary, and in the core book it's attrition. And now with the grind them down, it gives 3 victory points for every battle round if more enemy units are killed than own units and friendly units. So this has a good potential to give us the maximum points, or at least even if we do it for 3-4 rounds, we will be scoring 9-12 points. So this is quite good. Typically this would be better if we could go second, so we know what to go for. If the opponent killed 1 unit, then we can focus and try to get 2 units killed in our turn, or we can play a bit about this. If we go first, it's more difficult, but we can't affect who goes first anymore. It's just 1 dice roll, and we don't have the option to say, okay, go ahead, you start. Potentially this is a good one for Death Guard, as we are quite resilient. But it also depends on our army composition. If we have large units and the opponent, for example, have smaller units that are easier to take out, etc., then we have a big advantage. Of course, if we have a lot of small units. We have small units of poxwalkers here and there. Maybe we are also, that's a liability, for example, that the opponent can take out some of our units, and then we have problems doing it. But in general, attrition or the grind them down would suit quite well with our death card resilience. Then we have While We Stand We Fight, which is very popular, and now it's also been FAQ'd. So now we have to define the 3 units in our army with the highest point costs, and we get 5 victory points for each of those units that survive the battle. Previously, it was model cost base, so it was not the unit its size or something. It was just the 3 most point cost models in our army. For example, we could have 3 Plaguebearer Scrollers, for example, and then the opponent would have difficulty taking a Plaguebearer Scroller down, especially if we keep it in the backfield. But now it could be, for example, a large unit of Plague Marines that cost 200 points or something would be cost. Yeah, then they are the unit for the While We Stand We Fight instead of, for example, a Plaguebearer Scroller. So this can be a good secondary depending on our actual list. For example, if we have a big unit of Blight Lord Terminators, could be really tough for the opponent to take out. If we can get the Plaguebearer Scrollers to be this, it would be likewise. If we have, for example, 2 Mephitic Blight Holders, they are more expensive than one Plaguebearer Scroller, and then they would be probably more. They are not as resilient as the Plaguebearer Scroller. Mortarion could be good. If we have Mortarion, he's of course one of the most expensive units. It could be good to have it on Mortarion depending on the opponent we're facing. If they don't have the tools to take him out, then it could be like a good 5 points for Mortarion to survive. A big squad of Plague Marines, if this is one of the 3 most expensive, this could be a problem for us, because if the opponent has blast weapons, then yeah, the Plague Marines are not as resilient as some of the other units. So this takes a little bit more planning now to see what are actually the 3 most point units, and do we believe they can survive. If we believe they can survive the battle, it's really good, because we could score 10-15 points for this secondary. And here we have the first death card specific secondary, the Fleeing Vectors. We get 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if any enemy units fail the morale test and those enemy units had some models destroyed by plague weapons. So here we have potentially some good synergies with Break Their Spirit stratagem and other abilities that we have in our army to reduce leadership and etc. However, many enemies and many enemy armies have a lot of ways to deal with morale, auto-passing morale, improving morale, borrowing morale from other units, etc. So it's not as consistent, this morale thing. So I don't think, I think it would be difficult to have a consistent scoring with this secondary. If we go to the Battlefield Supremacy category, here we have some good options. For good secondaries, we start with Engage on All Fronts. This gives us 2 victory points at the end of each turn if we have units wholly within 3 quadrants, and 3 victory points if we have 4 quadrants. And we have to be not 6 inch within of the center to be wholly within the quadrants. So this is a really good one, and normally easy to get at least, let's say, 3 quadrants quite quickly in the game. And suits well with the primary trying to get to various parts of the board to take over objectives. And we score at the end of our own turn, so it's difficult for our opponent to prevent. Basically, it's like advancing and moving. But of course, and if we can do 3 quadrants for 5 rounds, that would be 10 victory points. And we would always be able to score at least some points with this secondary normally. It could be difficult for Death Card to get to all 4 quadrants, and we are not so fast to go quickly to the quadrants, but we have also some fast moving units like Blow Drones and Greater Blight Drones. The 14-inch move of the Blight Drone basically enables us to start from being at 4 quadrants, and again, it's difficult for the opponent to do something about it. Yeah, they have to destroy these units, but then we can have deep striking units coming, etc. So I think this is overall a quite good secondary. I typically tend to take this as one of my secondaries. Linebreaker, is 4 victory points at the end of a turn if 2 units or more are wholly within the enemy deployment zone. This can be difficult to get and stay in midfield with objectives. We can deep strike to go here if we can do it from turn 2, but we can still max and get 15 points from this. But it can also be difficult to deep strike inside the opponent's deployment zone if the opponent is screening with his unit and doesn't really allow us to come into his zone. So it could take some time until we start scoring line breaker as opposed to engage all fronts. And domination gives 3 victory points at the end of our turn if we control more than half of the total objective markers. This one harmonizes well with primary objective, and it's really good that you are scoring at the end of our own turn, so it's also more difficult for the opponent to prevent us from scoring this. This can be very tough to pull through turn 1, for example. We don't have any units with concealed position abilities. Probably will require a bit more spread out army. Maybe it's a high risk aiming for domination and maybe not scoring the 3 victory points. And if we can really get domination on the objectives, we probably are winning through the primary objectives. But but of course, this at least harmonizes very well with the primary objectives. And maybe now we have a little bit fewer units that are objective secure for this. And here we have the death card specific Despoiled Ground, which seems also like a popular choice, and it's quite interesting because it feels like a mix of those three, but focused on bubonic Astartes units are needed. And this means that a lot of our demon engines, for example, blow drones or something like this, they don't count as bubonic Astartes. So you have to keep this in mind if you choose Despoiled Ground. Poxwalkers, for example, are not bubonic Astartes, and a lot of other units. So here we score 4 victory points at the end of the battle if we at least have 1 unit within the opponent deployment zone and at least 1 wholly within our own. We also get 4 victory points on top if we have 1 bubonic Astartes unit wholly within 3 table quarters, again not within the center, or 6 victory points for 4 quarters. And then we have 4 victory points at the end of battle if we control more than half the objective markers, and we have bubonic Astartes units within 3 inches of those objectives. And we also score 4 victory points at the end of battle if every objective marker is within contagion range of our units. And by the end of the game, the 5th round, we have a 9-inch contagion aura. So this could be possible to achieve depending on how the battle has gone. And so this is an interesting secondary with potential to max points. Of course, we need the bubonic Astartes focus, and we need our army to survive the whole battle, a lot of our units to survive to score points. But it's an interesting some semi-combination of this, but it scores at the end of the battle, and here we are scoring, let's say, running through the game. If we go to the Warpcraft category, this is Psyche related, and this typically requires to do psychic actions. So we start with a mental interrogation. We get 3 victory points every time the special psychic action mental interrogation is performed, and 1 psyker can attempt this action with a warp charge of 4 once per turn and must target an enemy character within 18 inch. This can be denied, and the psyker, if he attempts to do this action, he cannot cast other spells in that turn. So doing this action, we are basically not utilizing the psychic abilities of this psyker for this, but if he's successful, we get 3 victory points. So we have to succeed all 5 turns in order to get the maximum 15 victory points, but also if we can do it fewer turns, could also be a good score. The death card, we can have psychic superiority. We have lots of psyker models. We could have a demon prince, we could have typhus, we could have a plaguecaster and mortarion, etc. So maybe then we could sacrifice, let's say, one of those to instead of casting psychic powers to mental interrogations and other actions. And many opponents don't have access, or they don't take psykers, so they could have difficulty denying this. So I think this could be worth considering if you take many psykers, but if you only have 1 or 2, I think you would be losing out more on the psychic powers that you cannot cast miasma or gift of contagions or gift of plagues or other putrescent vitality or whatever we want, why we took the psychic abilities in the first place. Then the psychic ritual is 15 victory points if the special psychic action psychic ritual has been successfully done 3 times with the same unit, and 1 psyker can attempt per turn, and they have to be 6-inch within the battlefield center. And it's a bit all or nothing reward. We don't get 10 points if we only do it 2 times. We need 1 psyker to come to the center and start doing this 3 times. So this takes a while to achieve. Maybe worth considering if we plan to go for the center. However, only few maps have objectives there, but there is an objective in the center, could be worth considering. And we have, of course, psychic superiority. This also has a synergy with investigate sites secondary in the next category that also requires us to do actions in the center. So if we go for the center, this could be interesting. Pierce the Veil, we get 8 victory points if we succeed with special psychic action 2 times, and 60 victory points or 15 victory points if we succeed with the action 4 times. So this 1 psyker character can attempt to do the Pierce of the Veil action, but he has to be with 6-inch within the opponent's battlefield edge and 6-inch away from enemy models. So I think it's really tricky to get there. And very tricky to get there and do this thing 4 times basically, but maybe something like a Typhus or a Sorcerer in Terminator armor that can deep strike, but still it could be difficult to go there. The enemy could also be preventing us, and it will still, we would have an expensive model like Typhus trying to do these actions instead of charging and taking care of other things to do. And then aboard the Witch, this has been FAQ'd. So this you can only select if you don't have any psykers in your own army, and it gives you victory points for destroying opponent psyker characters and psyker units. Typically not very useful for Death Guard, as we typically tend to have at least 1 psyker unit. It's quite difficult to make HQ now choices without taking psykers. So the final category, the shadow operations. So these require actions, and typically it's actions for infantry. And these actions they are typically done at the end of the movement phase. The infantry unit trying to do it cannot have advanced or fallen back, and it then cannot do anything else in that turn. It cannot shoot, it cannot charge, it cannot do anything, or the action is lost. And if it's a character doing it, then its aura abilities are not in effect. So it's quite, the actions can give you some benefits, but you're also tying down or potentially an expensive unit doing only a simple action instead of utilizing its full weapons and abilities, etc. So the first one is raise banners high, and you get 1 victory points at the end of each turn and the end of the battle for every objective marker which has our banner, and therefore we can do the raise the banner action. 1 or more infantry units can do it, but not poxwalkers, unfortunately. If they are within objective marker at the end of movement and have not fallen back or advanced, and there are no enemies nearby, and they cannot do anything else until the end of own turn. If the banners stay on the objective until if the enemy takes control of the objective later on, and then the banner is automatically taken down. So this is a potential to score some good points. However, it would be best to be done with cheap infantry. In this case, probably cultists is our best bet for doing raised banners high, or the smallest squad of plague marines. Unfortunately, as I said, we cannot use poxwalkers to raise banners. Otherwise, we are tying down loads of points, but we could potentially do it, but it's just worth considering how much we are investing in a big unit to do a simple action. If we can raise, let's say, 2 banners early, close to our deployment zone, and we can defend them, and then we can score quite good points for the whole game. And especially could be quite good for maps with 2 objectives close to the deployment zone, so depending on the mission layout. The investigate sites give us 3 victory points when the investigate site's action is successfully performed. 1 infantry unit, not character or poxwalkers, if they at the end of the movement, if they are within 6 inches of the center and no enemy units are within 6 inches of the center, and it's completed at the end of our own turn. Here we have the potential to get the full 15 points, but we need to control and dominate the center during most of the battle. And this, as I said, has some synergies with a psychic ritual that is a psychic action happening in the center. So maybe worth considering if you plan to go for the center. Yeah, however, only few maps have objectives in the center. We have the repair teleport Homer, giving us 5 victory points each time the repair teleport Homer action is successfully performed. One infantry unit, again not applicable for Poxwalkers, can perform this action if fully within the enemy deployment zone. And the problem with this one is that the action is completed at the next own command phase if the unit is still alive and kicking within the enemy deployment zone. And the enemy has a whole turn, therefore, to try to stop this or destroy this unit or charge it or whatever, tie it down and do bad things to this unit. And then we have from the Grand Tournament, we have the Deploy Scramblers, and this can give us 10 victory points at the end of the game if the action, the Deploy Scramblers action, has successfully been performed in our own deployment zone, in the opponent deployment zone, and in the middle. So once in each area of the map. And one infantry unit, not character or not Poxwalkers, can perform this action if fully within the on deployment zone at the end of movement, again not allowed to fall back or having advanced, etc. It can, wholly within own deployment zone or wholly within enemy deployment zone or more than 6 inches away from either deployment zone. So it's not just, you don't have to be just outside the deployment zone, you have to be 6 inches away. And the action is completed at the end of the own turn. So this is possible to complete without the opponent being able to prevent it. In the first turn, you can do it with a backfield infantry unit. In the second, third turn, etc., you can do the middle one or the enemy deployment zone. If you can deep strike in the enemy deployment zone, then you can do the action, but then you cannot, for example, charge with this unit. So again, it's you're deep striking maybe some death shrouds. Maybe they don't want to stay there and deploy scramblers. They want to go in and get serious. And here we have a death card specific, the spread the sickness, shadow operations secondary. This gives us 3 victory points for every contaminated objective at the end of the battle, and 1 death card infantry unit, and now including Poxwalkers, thankfully, can start this action at the end of the movement if they are within 3 inches of an objective marker that has not been contaminated yet, and there cannot be any enemy models within 3 inches of this objective marker. The action is completed at the end of the turn, and then you can choose one of 2 things. Either you roll a d6 and on a 4+ the objective is contaminated, or the unit, you can automatically, let's say, make the objective contaminated, but the unit performing the action suffered d3 mortal wounds. So I think this is a nice thematic fit for Poxwalkers and Death Card, contaminating stuff and taking some wounds. I think it's a really good use for Poxwalkers, and a backfield Poxwalker unit can do this. Let's say, at least you should always be able to do contaminate 1, take the mortal wounds with the Poxwalkers. You can replace the Poxwalkers, and you can move some Poxwalkers up to come and contaminate some of the other objectives. You can also use Plague Marines parked at an objective to do the same. Take the mortal wounds to secure the 3 points. You're maybe losing, you can maximum lose 1 Plague Marine from this, so it should be possible to contaminate a couple of objectives in most of the games. So I think this could be quite interesting from this category. So summarizing my view on the secondary objectives, so here are the 5 categories. So in the Purge the enemy, Assassinate, or Bring it down could be quite good choices depending on what the opponent is bringing. Now Bring it down is not as good as it was before. Now we are getting less points for it. I think Cut the Head Off with a Warlord is the least interesting option. In the No Mercy No Respite category, I think While We Stand We Fight or Grind Them Down / attrition if you're playing with the core rules. I think those can be really good for the death card resilience. The fleeing vectors, I think it's a problem with morale depending on what army you are facing, and I think thin their ranks is not yeah, I think is the worst choice in this category. In the battlefield supremacy, I think all of them are quite good. I personally enjoy engage all fronts. Despoiled Ground can be good. If we focus on Bubonic Astartes, there is a lot of ways to ensure to score the 15 points. Linebreaker and Domination, yeah, those are also quite good. I personally prefer Engage All Fronts a bit better. In the Warpcraft category where we require actions, I think Mental Interrogation and Psychic Ritual are quite decent, but again, it would take we cannot use the Psyker to cast the normal powers we would need while he's doing these actions. So I think it would require that you have a very high amount of Psykers so that you're covered on a Psychic, and then you have one just primarily to do secondaries. And in the shadow operations, these require actions from our infantry. Unfortunately, for most, the poxwalkers cannot do them. Deploy scramblers and raise the banners high have the potential to score good points, but again, you have to probably think of bringing some cheap units to do these actions and plan ahead how to do them. Spread the sickness, I think, could be quite fun. I will be interested to try that. Investigate sites is more related to the center, the center of the map, together with Psychic Ritual, and Repair Teleport Homer can be difficult to do. So the final thoughts, the secondary selection is important for the outcome of matched games. I think it's important when we think about the secondaries to choose. I think it's good to think about the synergy and the strong points of the death card. One of our strongest points is resilience and not speed, for example. So the resilience points to while we stand, we fight or grind them down from this category. Also, of course, always considering our opponent's weakness and strengths, depending on who we are facing. Are the ones we are facing equally strong or resilient, then maybe grind them down is not the best choice. As a quite elite army, Death Guard can be problematic for us to select many action-related secondaries that prevent our units from doing their full potential on the battlefield. And unfortunately, now with the new rules, our cheap poxwalkers cannot do normal infantry actions, and I think it's a bad idea to have a very big unit of Blight Lord raising banners. Of course, you could do it, but yeah, needs some planning and thought of if you choose these secondaries with a lot of actions, you need to think about your army building. It can be good to have secondaries that will score you at least some points regardless of how it goes, and that are difficult from your opponents to prevent. And I think a lot of the battlefield supremacy categories, for example, engage on all fronts or the despoiled ground, are good for these reasons. For the despoiled ground, think about having a Bubonic Astartes centered list. So you have, if you want to score with Bubonic Astartes in your own deployment and in the opponent's deployment, of course, yeah, having as many Bubonic Astartes units in the army. And then Purge the enemy secondaries can also be good. Those are focused on taking down enemy units, and you'll probably be going to be doing that in any case, taking down opponent monsters and vehicles and characters. But this depends also how many did your opponent include in his army. And the death card specific secondaries, as I said, Despoiled Ground seems quite interesting for Bubonic Astartes. And I'm really tempted to try the Spread the Sickness secondary, where we can use the poxwalkers to do some actions, and I think it seems like fun. So this concludes the video. What do you think about the secondaries? What have you been selecting so far with the death card, and have you been successful in your game scoring a lot of secondary points? If you like this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. Leave some comments below about the secondaries or other topics death card. If you want to support my efforts further, please visit my Patreon page, General Yanis. And with these words, General Yanis signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.